look, I think Xi Jinping is doing very well given Xi Jinping's ambitions. I think if you look at what he started off to do, when he came into power back at the end of 2012, and you fast forward to today, he has consolidated power in his own hands. He's increased the role of the party. He certainly has set out major Chinese ambitions on the global stage and has made progress on achieving them. He wanted China to be a leading technology and economic power on the global stage, and he's achieved that as well. So I think when he looks back,
Right.
again, according to his own metrics, he's done extremely well.
I've studied the geography of Taiwan. How does a pro like you respond to his stridency over Taiwan being the major issue? How does that, is it 90 miles? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like from here, it's like from here to downtown. Elizabeth Economy, how do you respond to the Chinese discussion of Taiwan?
So I'm actually quite relieved by the fact that, yes, Xi Jinping has raised this as sort of the central issue for Beijing, which we already knew, but the response from the United States has been very muted. And so all we've seen thus far coming out of the summit is a statement by the Chinese side. There's been no acknowledgement by the US side that we take this on board and somehow are going to change our position or our approach to Taiwan. And I think that's something that many people in the national security space, many in Congress, even probably members of the president's own cabinet were concerned about. So I think it's fine that Xi Jinping raises this as the number one issue for China. What's critical is how we then address it.
Elizabeth, typically when a U.S. president goes to China in particular, the expectations are fairly high that there's going to be some material agreements, some material discussions. Do we have any of those expectations for this summit? We haven't heard much so far.
I mean, I'm actually pretty pleased by what's come out thus far. I think we went in with sort of three big buckets of issues. First, we wanted some mechanisms for stabilizing the relationship. And I think here the two countries were aligned. And there's the talk about the Board of Trade and the Board of Investment. I think Board of Trade is further along than the Board of Investment. But basically, this is going to be an area where the two sides will come together and try to make progress in non-sensitive areas of trade. So fine, check that box. Second, I think, the president wanted big short-term purchases. And I think, we've seen there's going to be soybeans, there's going to be planes, there's going to be beef, maybe energy. He'll get
Right.
his big purchases. And then finally, and I think this is the most important area, the bigger strategic areas. So Iran, AI, and again, on the Taiwan front, no acknowledgement on our side that we're prepared to change our position. But we did get the Chinese to acknowledge on Iran that they
Right.
want the Strait of Hormuz open. They don't think Iran should profit once the strait is open, and they don't think Iran should have a nuclear weapon. So we have to see whether or not we can make China actually translate that agreement into action to pressure Iran. But I think it's a very positive turn of events.
We welcome all of you across America, around the world. It is Bloomberg Surveillance on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast there. Anne-Marie Horton coming up from Beijing. But we're thrilled to bring you Elizabeth Economy of Stanford University and their Hoover Institution. Her book years ago, The River Runs Black, was a definitive graduate school study that was hugely successful on the environmental impact of China. Liz, in your wonderful effort of a few years ago, The World According to China, you close with a China reset. How does China reset after President Trump?
So I think the thing to bear in mind with this summit and the sort of meeting between President Xi and President Trump is that I think Secretary of State Rubio really defined the relationship pretty well when he said, look, we're going to look for areas of cooperation, but we each have our own areas of interest. They're going to conflict. They're going to continue to conflict, and we want to manage the relationship. And so I think the goal here is largely the same as it's been, for 2 decades or more, which is sort of a managed competition, managed strategic competition. The only question is whether or not the conflict occupies a greater amount of space than the areas of cooperation. We're going to continue to have a lot of frictions, and President Xi is going to continue to do just what President Xi wants to advance Chinese interests, how he defines Chinese national interests, irrespective of whatever the United States says or does during this summit.
Elizabeth, I think for many of our viewers, many of our listeners, President Xi is the only leader that they've ever known in China. Give us just a sense of what his position is today. How do you think about that position 3, 5, 10 years from now?
So, I mean, what makes President Xi different from a number of leaders who have come before him in China is just the degree of power that he's managed to consolidate into his own hands and the extent to which he's managed to translate the vision for China, both at home and on the global stage that, he articulated 14 years ago. I think critically, he's coming upon, what will be probably his fourth 5-year term as General Secretary of the Communist Party, likely president of the country. And so, people will say he's president for life. I think he will step back probably and won't have a fifth 5-year term, but will remain as sort of chairman of the party so he can continue to exert control. But really, the degree to which he's consolidated power, I think, was unexpected by people either outside China or, frankly, inside China.
I look, Liz, at where we are, and I go back to our misjudgment of our intelligence of the Soviet Union years ago. Do we have intelligence on China? Or are we as blind looking at Beijing, Shanghai, and the rest, their submarine threat, et cetera? Are we as blind as we were with Gorbachev?
I mean, I think, are we as blind? I think the challenge now is Xi Jinping has made China more opaque rather than less opaque as his tenure has progressed. So it takes more effort to sort of get inside China to understand what's happening. It's also more difficult because we don't have as many journalists on the ground. It's much harder for scholars and students to go to China to spend time to do research. So our intelligence in that respect is more challenging than it was, a decade and a half ago. At the same time, I think we do see evidence, if you look closely enough, we do see evidence of fractures within Chinese society.
Right.
You see the evidence of it in the fact that the Chinese consumer is not buying, that there's a sort of the lie flat movement, the youth saying we don't want to work, the high rates of youth unemployment, concerns over what AI is going to do to labor in China, just as there are concerns in the United States. So you have to spend more time and more energy looking and maybe have a little more expertise to get at what's going on inside China, outside of the incredible skyrocketing exports and the technology accomplishments and everything that we're kind of sort of fed on a daily basis from the Chinese media and frankly from our own media. But it's there if you look for it. We can get
Right.
at the intelligence, but it's tough.